Hello, Something Guys and Gals. This is Something Guy 912. The Borderlands franchise, like many modern franchises, started on humble beginnings, had a breakout hit, and then over time, slowly but surely, worsened in quality over the years. Not simply content in letting a good thing die, Gearbox saw fit to accelerate the diminishing returns of its subsequent titles, with not only two mainline titles in the same year, but now a live-action movie that only pays respect to Borderlands in its iconography and milking the audience of its past goodwill. Perhaps Gearbox saw the reception of the Halo TV show and the Fallout TV show and thought, we could do better, but mixed better with worse given the quality of those two terrible shows. While I'm not one to champion the idea of adaptation faithfulness to the duress of anything else, it does start to paint a cynical picture as to the motives behind making these kinds of movies and shows for no other reason but a belief that translating a video game to a different medium is somehow superior to it, all the while paying no respect to it. I could go on the many wrongs and many more wrongs of the Borderlands movie, but we got more preamble to cover before I can do just that. First, like with the Wednesday show and Has Been Hotel, I have to use screenshots with only brief clips because of it being copyrighted material. I don't even know if I can get away with even using clips given this is a movie, but time and the YouTube TOS will tell if that will be the case. Nevertheless, the background will be supplemented with various gameplay clips of my end game builds in Borderlands 3. Second is, while I will harangue on this movie for only giving referential treatment to the games and nothing else, regardless, I am going to keep my criticism largely on the movie's own internal consistency. Thirdly, seeing as this is a movie, there's no reason for me to split this into multiple parts, as the reason I had to split it before was the sheer amount of copyrighted material I had to cover. Has Been Hotel being 3.5 roughly, and Wednesday being 6 hours, and didn't want to risk having to completely render that amount of content for such a small amount flagged. And now, with that all out of the way, let's eat this movie's butt with its own poopy-mouthed ass faces until it dies from loser poisoning like the stupid puss crutch that it is. We start this movie with a very tired Lilith, voiced by Cate Blanchett, monologuing what is a slightly altered synopsis of the first Borderlands game's story. The main difference between the two is that what was left of the Iridian technology was used to advance the technologies of other civilizations going forward, and used mainly to chase after the vault nestled in Pandora. I don't want to put too much attention on the casting choice here, but given that not only does this movie make mention of Lilith's age in relation to the actor, while the choice in of itself is a far cry from how Lilith is normally portrayed, is a curious decision. One would almost assume a cynical choice to hedge their bets on A-list celebrities to deflect from the evident awfulness of this movie, as though movies like Furiosa and The Fall Guy didn't fail at the box office in spite of the A-list actors present in them too. Not to mention what this movie is making at the box office at current, I'm sure the unenthused performance of Cate Blanchett and what will be Kevin Hart and Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie might have something to do with that. Anyhow, the subtle commentary of the corporate wars present in Borderlands 1 drills into your prefrontal cortex with all the visual noise, and I'm sure Gen Alphas are creaming their pants too. I do find it poetically ironic how a game series that has gone at length about how corporations pump and dump on random planets for opportunistic goals has been turned into a pump and dump for 2K, Gearbox, and Lionsgate to plunder, if that was the point of this social commentary in mind. Regardless, this metaphorical arms race was all in a pursuit to find this vault, which has so far been fruitless, with only a sliver of hope in a prophecy regarding the daughter of Iridia being born and discovering this vault to shape Pandora anew. Now, I should mention how writing prophecy stories in your movies is already a bad setup for writing, but not even conveying where this prophecy came from, who wrote it, or when is even fucking worse. First off, when you write a prophecy like this, you have summarily given the game away that is what will happen in the story. so there's going to be no surprise or tension as to whether this, so to speak, daughter of Iridia exists or not, or if they would even find this vault that may or may not exist. Secondly, why would the daughter of Iridia have a better chance of finding this vault as opposed to anyone else? Just because they share a bloodline with the Iridians? But, oh, we'll get to just how our respective protagonists discovered this vault and all the nonsense that followed with it. And like with the Borderlands games, at least the recent ones, this movie sees fit to mock its own prophecy with Lilith making some snide remark about it being bullshit. Not only is this not even remotely funny, but you can't try to fool the audience into thinking this is all ridiculous when your prophecy states very specific circumstances for this vault being discovered and or opened. Unless Lilith specified where she likely heard this rumor and didn't believe them, getting a conceptualization as to the validity of this prophecy can come only meta-wise by the writers themselves, whom for all intents wouldn't want to undercut this narrative shortcut they're making. Anyhow, we cut to some Atlas-designed satellite, a bit curious it didn't go for Hyperion given the presence of it on Pandora, getting bombarded by something. It's never really explained why and how, and the only inference is that Roland, the Atlas soldier gone rogue, did it. The problem with that, of course, is that Roland himself seems to explain to Tiny Tina, who's locked here, that he was advised by Atlas himself to get her to safety from here. This could also be inferred as a lie, what with Tiny Tina downing his claims on his height. Yes, we fucking get it. Kevin Hart is short. We know it. But Roland isn't supposed to be short, or at least not remarked as being short for a fucking joke. And, oh, if that joke didn't have you French kissing a 357, the joke about Roland's helmet being hard to breathe in was also ear-gougingly hilarious too. Yeah, too bad that joke makes no sense for Atlas to purposefully design helmets with no ventilation, and that really you had Roland take off his helmet both because he doesn't wear it in-game, and so we can see the actor's face 24/7. If you want to make a joke about a helmet being unwieldy to wear funny, take some notes from Spaceballs, you hacks. Tina seems prepped to go, but we should also mention that this is not even 3 minutes into the movie, and we already have a lot of visual and informative baggage thrown at us hickledy-pickledy, like why Tina is supposedly trapped here for being Atlas's daughter, why Roland is doing any of this, or choosing to do so now of all times, etc. Unfortunately, action is going to get in the way of things because boy, that 90 minutes wears out quick, don't it? It's not particularly good, what with either the Atlas soldiers waiting their turn to attack Roland, charging at his position gunpoint, and what have you, but this is perhaps the best it's going to get, given what happens later. Tina starts to have a change of heart about going with Roland, at least until Krieg decides to come into the picture, quite literally, by breaking out of his cell, because apparently Atlas are poised to be experimenting on bandits this way. If it's that easy for Krieg to break out of his cell, no different than a glass pane, then how are the other bandits not escaping? And why did Krieg time his approach to escape at this exact moment for Roland and Tina to get knocked out? Utterly no other reason but for Krieg to kill some more faceless goons before one Commander Knox comes into the fold. And you know you have to give a shit about this character because she's the only one who doesn't have a helmet on. On first watch, I had assumed that this Knox was simply a gender-bent version of General Knox, since Roland only refers to her as Knox at this time, but as it turns out, she's some weird mismatch of him and Commandant Steele. Not sure why they didn't just commit to one or the other unless they wanted to have the name recognition of General Knox, but also have the benefit of gender-bending her using Steele as a scapegoat, because God knows no one gives a shit about that character. Again, really making me think these decisions are all cynically done to have your cake and eat it too. Also of note is that there is some implied history between Roland and Knox, which will only get lampshaded as some sort of romantic relationship and nothing more, and boy, the resolution of that history is equally as abrupt as it is unironically hilarious. Moving on from that, this was basically all done to set up what will be the dynamic quartet of main characters that is a huge deviation from the main four we got in Borderlands 1 and 2, and a lot of this decision is entirely driven by meta, simply because Tiny Tina and Krieg are fan favorites, and Brick and Mordecai sadly are not. But even with that excuse in mind, what the writers do with Krieg in this story is nothing short of background fodder saying one-liners in an aggressive tone while being Tiny Tina's bodyguard brother throughout. So again, with these changes, and the changes to Nox so far, has me poised against this movie, not just in terms of the butchering they're doing to the adaptation, but as to why they're doing the butchering to begin with. Roland convinces Krieg to help him get Tina and them out of there, and as to how or why, we will never know, as we hard cut to Promethea with the first of many a copyrighted song present in this movie. While Borderlands has been known to use copyrighted music typically at the beginning or end of its respective story, this movie poises to pull a Suicide Squad 2016 with how erratic the choices are. And it can't even use music that Borderlands hasn't before, as it reuses the heavies, How You Like Me Now, for this section, which was used at the end of Borderlands 2. You might ask why I'm haranguing on something usually inconsequential, but given the extremely odd and likely cynical choice of cast for the titular characters present, there was also an extremely odd and likely cynical choice of the music present, as opposed to taking cues of the game's actual soundtrack, a la Borderlands 1, to great effect. Anyhow, the reason we're in Promethea is to get Lilith's perspective as all that was happening, as she's currently preoccupied with a mark she's sending to some bar in a seedy part of town. A bit odd that Lilith was keeping a low profile outdoors, but just lets slip her name and notable characteristic once she's in the bar to this character named Quinn. And as far as I know, this character is a complete invention of this movie and not a derivative of anything Borderlands related. Speaking of, is it me or does the setting of this bar really not take advantage of how Promethea was depicted in Borderlands 3? And boy, that's saying a lot for me to actually praise Borderlands 3 in some respect, but seriously, if you happen to jump into this movie late, like I did, and didn't know this was a Borderlands movie, would this scene with Lilith and Quinn give you any indication? Lilith and Quinn discuss some small talk regarding a heist down in Electra City, and this will be tally 1 for this movie paying lip service to locations present in the Borderlands games while giving them no meaningful depth to them. Although in fairness, being reminded of Electra City and what a turbo cunt Mad Moxie is in that particular area, maybe it was better they hadn't. Supposedly Lilith's mark was part of that heist and got too trigger happy for him to even explain his case before Lilith puts his head on her tab. Of course, any further elaboration as to what Lilith's current job details will have to be better saved for never, as we have to find a way to insert her into the story involving Roland, Krieg, and Tina in the most clunky, convoluted, and frankly counterproductive way imaginable. Some random goons accost Lilith in what feels like a bar fight scene I've seen 1,000 times over, asking, or should I say, demanding her do a job for their employer. Lilith declines on her current mark, to which another goon pulls out a gun along with the barkeep. Now, keep in note that when this happened, the barkeep says, "Hey, not here, big boy," as to say she doesn't want violence nor gunfire taking place in her bar. And yet, soon after, Lilith has a quip about what the broken-nosed goon said, and blind fire sweeps all the other goons except him, with no reaction from the barkeep herself. Not to mention just how risky it would be had Lilith even mistimed one of those shots and got collateral on that. If I'm to believe that the barkeep really frowns on instances like this, shouldn't she be quite infuriated, especially at Lilith, who seems to have a friendly relationship with? I know this scene was just supposed to show how much of a badass Lilith is, but you really gotta be careful of how you do that, because there's plenty a scene can do to characterize someone by how they react to a given situation. Lilith beats down the broken-nosed goon as all the bar patrons leave, save for one who gives her a round of applause and introduces himself, at least before Lilith just fucking shoots him too for no other reason other than association with the other goons. Again, barkeep, anything to say on this, that Lilith just killed all your profits for that day and just chooses violence on anyone even being remotely antagonistic? No? Okay then. As it turns out, the dude Lilith just shot was simply a puppet wearing some kind of headpiece for one Dukelian Atlas, I guess expecting Lilith to do something like this. He wants Broken-Nosed Goon to put on his headpiece so he can exchange words with Lilith, and the goon makes a fair retort about Lilith just having killed his last puppet with no remorse, and all that Mr. Atlas has to say is that she wouldn't kill someone of your caliber, and Lilith quite literally shrugs to that suggestion. Should I also mention that Lilith doesn't care about killing a dude she believed to be the head of Atlas and just killed someone pretending to be him with no care in the world? Moreover, if Lilith has been poised to kill already, why didn't she kill him like she did all the others? Was it just to facilitate this negotiation Atlas makes with her? Broken Nose Goon puts on the headpiece reluctantly and properly introduces himself again, with Lilith making a quip about him being the CEO obvious given his last name. Quite literally, 5 for 5 on this shortcut to joke writing with anything Borderlands, huh? You wrote this dude to have his last name be Atlas. It's not humorous to point out something you invented. Like, shit. If you wanted to make a joke at the expense of his last name, you could have done something like have Lilith say, "Oh, and you think of yourself holding the weight of the world on your shoulders?" Or if you wanted to go punny, have her say, "I'm Atlas shrugged" to that mention of the corporation. Just something that isn't just meta-referential for fucking once. Atlas explains his contract with Lilith, saying that his daughter was kidnapped and needs Lilith's help retrieving her. Lilith asks why not his men find her, and Atlas says that while he does have the Crimson Lance, that the reason for this kidnap happening was because of one of them turning tail, so he needs an outsider that can survive the harsh wastes of Pandora to find her. Yeah, we'll get to that line of reasoning later. Lilith doesn't want to step 50 feet, or in this case 50 light years, close to that planet, but finds her pennies pinched for a proper pay cut, so she acquiesces, at least once her current market is done. And then, Atlas, taking control of Broken Nose Goon, just shoots her mark dead to get her right on top of doing this contract. So, keep in mind, Lilith was perfectly fine killing 3 dudes on even the suggestion of violence. But when Atlas quite literally disrupts her current paycheck to do his bidding, she's adipose to do nothing about it? She's even fine taking some kind of beacon from the guy who just killed her mark in front of her, while Fat Boy just waddles tail between his legs after. Should she not be more upset or even more doubtful of Atlas's sincerity up to this point? Well, regardless, this scene was pretty awful, not only in trying to get Lilith into the picture in Pandora, but by the nature of Atlas having even arranged this meeting in a manner not cordial in the slightest, on top of the unintentional moral duplicity on display of Lilith for her actions here, as well as the inconsistency of her actions thereafter. Should I also mention how stupid it is for Atlas to communicate to people this way, or should I save that for how he communicates in a manner that doesn't require human test subjects to assume his role later? Do I let dog shit fester in the sun to cook so it's easier for me to pick up, or get it while it's fresh and disgusting? Boy, my options are quite varied. I also hope you weren't feeling attached to Promethea as a planet, as this is the one and only scene in which it takes place there, making me wonder why this bar scene couldn't have been done on Pandora, so we didn't have to contrive Lilith to go back there. Not to mention how Lilith, being off-world from Pandora in the first place, will cause further problems with the plot going forward, but regardless, Lilith gets dropped into a random spot on Pandora to go find her mark. It should be noted how stupid it is for Atlas to give her what effectively is a tracker fob to look for Tina, but also chose to send her in the middle of nowhere on Pandora, and especially problematic for whom she comes across later, despite having been sent to a random spot on this otherwise huge planet. Lilith takes a stroll down Pandoran Lane, spots a downed Atlas ship, and monologues that
the soldier had hijacked one of Atlas's shuttles and crash-landed here months ago. There wasn't much left of it. They'd been stripped for parts and vandalized by bolt hunters. No way to know if he and Tina even survived.
From the fuselage. So this causes more problems than I had initially thought. So remember how Fat Boy earlier said that his boss wasn't one for waiting, and Atlas himself makes it clear by getting Lilith's contract out of the way for her to do this one? Well, apparently he is for waiting if the manner of which Roland kidnapped Tina and marooned themselves on Pandora had occurred months ago. Now, of course, one would reason that perhaps the time when Lilith took the contract and got shipped to Pandora was within the course of a few months, and that is why Atlas was so urgent to get her going, but remember, the sequence between Roland's initial jailbreak and the Promethea scene supposedly happened intermittently. So that begs the question of why Atlas only now is so concerned about his daughter and not months prior. Secondly, if Roland had hijacked an Atlas ship and downed it in Pandora, couldn't Atlas track that ship and where it last landed, and then triangulate the likelihood of where they went from that point onward? Thirdly, why would Lilith exclaim, "I'm not even sure they survived," if she was given a contract to look for them, and that the only way Lilith could even surmise this is that somehow Atlas doesn't have a way to track their own hijacked ships en route, despite apparently knowing full well the implications of Tiny Tina's capture once we do figure out what her deal is in relation to Pandora's vault. Lilith continues the monologue that she talked to some locals who say that Tina and this soldier passed through Firestone weeks ago. Tally 2 for paying lip service to a location from the games, especially prescient for one so iconic to the franchise that you would at least think they try their best to market the hell out of it, but nope, this Firestone wounds up just being a generic scrapyard like the rest of Pandora is. As for what she said, I'm not sure why Tina and Roland would risk retreading ground in an area they crash landed if they believed for even a second that Atlas wouldn't be mucking about the place, unless they were just scavenging like the rest of the locals. As for them, there's a sequence where Lilith shoots down a bandit outrunner in a context not very well conveyed between the prior scenes, not to mention the really shoddy CGI work on said vehicle, and Lilith's acrobatics on display here, but regardless, we've yet to have any meaningful cameos from the games appear in Pandora. So in we segue to Lilith catching a bus run by one Marcus Kincaid, as per his appearance throughout all the games, who is quite adamant about referring to Lilith as a vault hunter, while she herself denies that label as adamantly as he. There's not too much to glean from this bus ride here, apart from this actor really doing his best to mimic the look and mannerisms of Marcus to the best of his ability, and it is admirable that he does despite not having any major significance in the plot. Not like this character ever did in the context of the games, but that's besides the point. He plays an advertisement regarding the nature of searching for these vaults, while getting a bit too meta in relation to the games as he refers to Firestone as the place where all vault hunters start their journey. An otherwise inconsequential nod to the games, but absolutely nonsensical in this movie's universe if we're to believe that these vaults are nothing more than a rumor, and that even if people believe they were real, would likely be on any random dot on the planet and not just Firestone. Lilith makes her stop while her Atlas tote bag is gracelessly thrown off the bus. A bit odd that Lilith forgot to grab that once she left, and that Marcus didn't think to remind her of that before she left, but all that was to ensure Lilith's concern about that beacon she got was left undamaged. The nature of this beacon's condition will play significance in the major contrivances that follow this story, so bear with me, this is relevant. Lilith saunters around Firestone, eyeing a rusty old satellite dish that has the EchoNet tag emblazoned on it, while some curious third party is spying her from a distance. Take note of the lines of text in this third party's periphery as to who this thing is, and for what lead poisoning inducing hilarity their interactions with Lilith will lead to. Apparently of note is that during this whole montage, Lilith had been scoping out Roland and Tina for a good 2 weeks, while taking a gander at some hologram wanted posters of him. Yeah, woulda fooled me that 2 weeks passed, because it seriously looked like Lilith was only on Pandora for a good few hours. Unless the dialogue was clunkily trying to wedge what the locals said about noticing Roland being at Firestone a few weeks ago, ending up dry. Lilith makes camp at night while gazing at the digital photograph of Tiny Tina, not sure how this kind of technology would work in a normal application, before hearing some rumbling in the distance and proceeds to fire a few pot shots in that general direction. Jesus Christ, shoot first, ask questions later with this bitch, huh? But as it turns out, the person she shot was none other than Claptrap. Yay! And just when I thought life was worth living! And he's voiced by Jack Black, whom, while does put his all into the role, he's putting his all into a character that is not in the least way funny, and the most obnoxious stain on the Borderlands IP, omitting some notable exceptions, of course. Even Claptrap makes it abundantly clear that his facilitation as a robot is nothing more but a vomit of shitty jokes, while trying to establish his nature and why he's come to Lilith of all. This should be duly noted, as this Claptrap is the last of his kind, like with the Claptrap in Borderlands 2 as opposed to 1, and this will come at a head for the absolute
incredible luck.
of this claptrap coming across Lilith so easily, especially when Lilith had no idea as to where to look for Tina across the whole of Pandora. Anyhow, Lilith gets annoyed and continues to shoot Claptrap to no avail until Claptrap lets in that he was programmed by someone to help Lilith. Specifically, Claptrap states that he had been laid dormant for 36 years and that at the moment Lilith stepped foot on Pandora that he suddenly reactivated to go about his prime directive. So, where to start with this horseshit? Well, first off, that's some impressive technology that Lilith's footsteps somehow had the geological fortitude to spring this hunk of scrap metal back to life across the entire surface area of Pandora, and somehow this technology was still able to function for the better part of 36 years, and even with the perchance of somehow knowing Lilith would return here. Now granted, if we go by what I understand of the video games, it actually makes a lot more sense that this curious watcher would know when Lilith resurfaced to Pandora to go about rearming this robot companion to help, but given what I know what the movie actually establishes, this is an insane level of convenience for not only Lilith to come across this companion at the same time as her trying to find Tina, but for Claptrap to so easily find her in what amounts to only a day's time. But hey, surely we wouldn't want to know how Claptrap was able to find Lilith so easily and without any complications along the way. No, you want to know if Claptrap can fucking dance or if he can navigate stairs. Most notably, Claptrap can access the EchoNet to help Lilith find Tiny Tina. Again, really convenient that Lilith found just the person to help her find Tina when she had no other leads, but that apparently this technology is exclusive to Claptrap and not something that Atlas has access to. By this movie's logic, Claptrap should be an invaluable resource if he not only can do this, but is also the last of his kind to do so, right? Unless I'm mistaken that the EchoNet is only localized on Pandora. If the satellite dish Lilith was eyeing earlier was an indication, that would still mean that Atlas could use the EchoNet on Pandora if they wanted to. Well, bullshit contrivances aside, Claptrap scans Tina's photo and informs Lilith that she's sauntered in a quarry up Tundra Express, about 138 days travel on foot from their current route. Man, if Atlas was already impatient, foregoing the supposed months he sat on his hands about Tina's capture, about finding his daughter, he's going to be real irritated it'll take Lilith this long to get there. But Lilith states to Claptrap that they'll need some wheels. A bit odd she didn't have Marcus hitch them another ride unless he only ferries Vault Hunters to Firestone. And in we cut to the next day, where Lilith spots in the distance Crimson Land soldiers and bandits making an arrangement to find Tiny Tina. So this is really fucking stupid for Atlas to do this based on his prior claim that he needs an outsider to trudge through the waste if he was just going to have his soldiers try to find Tina anyway. And while sure, you can infer he was lying to Lilith about this, but what benefit would Atlas have to lie about this if he was planning to hire her, knowing that Lilith would inevitably come across his men out on Pandora? This also compounds the issue of these Atlas soldiers apparently not taking advantage of using the EchoNet if this technology is so good at finding Tiny Tina by what Claptrap does with her picture that they apparently need to commune with bandits in order to help their investigation. Once the Atlas APC leaves, Lilith shoots the cage door with the prisoners and the bandit riding them on his outrunner, getting the prisoners to flee. Lucky for Lilith, none of these scavengers chose to take the ride for themselves despite it being prime pickings for this wasteland, but whatever, the writers just wanted to show the good of Lilith, even if logically this would have bit her in the ass to do so. Lilith takes shotgun while Claptrap rides carriage into what is the quarry of Tundra Express, and if the sarcasm didn't already show, I really doubt the validity of what we're seeing as a quarry or Tundra Express. Claptrap yammers some more in the back while Lilith leisurely strides out, wondering if Claptrap was even right about the coordinates. Lilith spots Tiny Tina's iconic nomenclature and pries the door open to find a little bungalow inside with no one present at the moment. Although, it seems Lilith already knew Tina was hiding somewhere with this line as Tina comes out of her hiding place, not in the least bit perturbed or apprehensive about Lilith being here. Especially when Lilith casually tosses her a Atlas chocolate bar, and she proceeds to eat it without question, as though she was out on her own with no one to help. Tina even seems to vindicate the circumstances. Lilith asks where the soldier who took her went, and Tina, mouthful, says that he left her and hasn't been seen in days. I also should mention that Lilith came here to grab Tina under the belief that she was taken against her will, so it should stand to reason that Lilith herself should be apprehensive about how cool Tina is playing her current situation. Anyhow, Lilith tells Tina that she was sent to bring her home to her father, and Tina has a reaction that forces her to sound utterly elated at that fact, with Lilith being reminded of the beacon she was given and having difficulty finding it until it inexplicably slips from her hand and under the bunk of Tina's bed. This couldn't be a more scripted contrivance for Lilith to be a klutz and to be easily forgetful for what will happen next in this scene, but it is, as we will soon discover. Lilith continues to struggle to reach for the beacon as Tina continues to glaze up her dad until Lilith spots some dynamite precociously next to her from where she's reaching from. You know, for someone who apparently has the hearing and foresight to kill 3 dudes behind her in a blind fire sweep and fire a pot shot that hit Claptrap's eye, she's apparently very dense to things right in front of her. Anyhow, Tiny Tina says this line that is simultaneously cringe-inducing and awkward, given the context of Lilith being crouched down when she says this, distracting Lilith to go get one of Tina's bunnies over getting the beacon. As it turns out, the bunny was nothing more than a bomb that apparently was set off from just touching it, and Lilith manages to avoid the impact, but recoiling from the explosion itself. As it turns out, the entire nature of that shed and Tina being there was all a ruse to flush out would-be bounty hunters collecting her, as Tina has no interest to return home. She throws some more bunny bombs at Lilith, who darts around them before getting into cover. We also see that the blast created a fulcrum by way of a barrel and some kind of catwalk railing, which will be set up for some other clunky action scene later. The more important thing is that as a result of avoiding all those explosions, Lilith's beacon is damaged, meaning that had Lilith been more focused on collecting the beacon instead of those badonkadonks, had Lilith not somehow forgotten where she put that beacon, and had she not let it slip her hands like a bar of soap, none of this would be happening. But even in the interest of this movie having shitty consequences to its shitty actions, it can't even commit to that, as we will also discover soon. Lilith has Claptrap attempt fixing that beacon. A bit odd she would expect him to do that, what with it being Atlas Tech and he Hyperion, but fuck it, Claptrap is already the plot device to end all plot devices, so might as well add another notch on his belt. Lilith tries to negotiate Tina's rescue to her while Tina mocks her, prompting Lilith to go the more violent route until Tina summons Krieg in to have the two of them duke it out. The action gets worse here, as Lilith's bullet fire apparently means jack shit to Krieg's armor or weapons, despite her bullets killing that bandit in the mask with no entry or exit wound, and never trying to shoot him in any of the areas not covered in armor too! Oh, and of course, Claptrap is spectating all of this just to ensure that every possible microsecond isn't lapse in overstimulation. Lilith, in the commotion, spots the fulcrum, runs to the top of the platform as Krieg predictably leaps to her, in astoundingly bad CGI too, no less, and slides downward as Krieg falls onto the platform, propelling Lilith upward in equally bad CGI to meet Tina at her level and at gunpoint. I guess Tina expected this, as she also has her launcher aimed at her. Apparently it's the Nukem with Tiny Tina paint and Borderlands 3 aesthetic slapped over it for her to do this, unless she was just sitting with it in hand until Lilith did this. With it being a Truxican standoff, Lilith disarms herself and pleads in the same manner as earlier, only now Tina adds that she has no father in relation to who sent Lilith, who doesn't care about the formalities and just wants to get off of Pandora quick as she can. Not sure what significance of having that action scene entailed, if it was just going to be the same speech check that Lilith failed earlier to play out again, but I suppose they wanted the action to mask the nonsense that follows it. Like what happens next. Lilith gets cut short of her discussion with a rumbling in the distance, followed by Commander Knox piloting a Stingray. Apparently, Commander Knox was not in the know about who Atlas hired to find Tina, with what she says, along with Tina having this quip about Nox being here being Lilith's fault. Of course, you're probably wondering how the fuck Nox found Lilith and Tina here if Lilith's beacon was broken on top of their limited understanding of where Tina and Roland fled to, and the answer is sit and spin for all this movie explains. The only possible out that could help with this is that maybe when the beacon got damaged, that it inadvertently sent a distress call to Atlas, like a failsafe if you will, but unfortunately, that patching up a hole will be reopened later in the story. A whole bevy of Atlas APCs and Stingrays surround the place, the soldiers also being armed with Atlas rifles that look more akin to the ones from Borderlands 3, with Reese's takeover as opposed to the ones from the first game, but potato tomato. Despite apparently wanting to collect on that bounty, Lilith tries to put herself in front of Tina to protect her, but Tina objects to go so long as Lilith is spared. Now, bear in mind, Lilith has no reason to believe that Atlas has reneged on that contract, and even if they did, wouldn't have any reason to kill Lilith here since their work is effectively done, so why Lilith is so standoffish to Nox is quite befuddling. Like with Lilith, Tina's deal was also a trick as she tosses one of her bunny bombs to Nox, who quickly tosses it downward. The resulting explosion collapses the stack of containers with Lilith and Tina along for the ride, and this entire set piece somehow put Lilith and Tina in a better position to escape Nox's entourage. Geez, how lucky the circumstances happened exactly in this manner, as opposed to Lilith and Tina being turned into a pancake wedged between a bunch of sheet metal. Lilith and Tina try to walk away from the wreckage, but not before Nox again chases them down. Lilith once again putting herself in front of Tina, gun aimed at Nox. Again, where was this sudden heel turn for Lilith, who nearly died twice to Tina, and shouldn't care less for her if the whole point of her finding Tina was to make a quick buck? Hell, where did they even establish that Atlas was going to fuck over Lilith in this scene? I get that the writers are ultimately doing this to have the dynamic quartet with no rhyme or reason to it, but fuck me, could we at least have a shitty rhyme and reason to it? The standoff gets cut short by an oncoming vehicle that Nox has to avoid. A bit stupid how they just established that the Stingrays can hover and yet she can't reposition a bit higher to aim her gun at Lilith, but nevertheless the driver of the vehicle is Roland, who hurries Tina in. I specify Tina because nowhere does Roland specify Lilith is fine to come in too, since this is the first time he's even seen her, not to mention the circumstances of why Lilith was here in the first place. But that drama will have to be saved for the next drawn out action scene. Krieg also manages to get himself in before they drive off, and while you think this would spare us the misery of Claptrap being pivotal to this story, alas, he's able to chase after them. So fast, in fact, I'm surprised Lilith even bothered having him in the cage if he could keep up with these APCs on one wheel. Roland and Tina bicker a bit about using explosions, despite Tina's trap being used countless times for bounty hunters before, until he's able to even remotely address the elephant in the passenger seat as being a bounty hunter out to collect Tina. Now, you'd think this would cause issue for Roland and have a scene like in Fury Road play out, but again, Lilith suddenly switch alignments on a dime, and that you can't expect the writers to weave drama and action at once, do ya? So in we ensue our chase sequence with Claptrap insisting that Lilith inadvertently left him. And boy would I want my brain matter to be inadvertently paved across the walls, what with insisting Claptrap be a part of this movie, with Stingrays on high and APCs on low going after them. For no discernible reason, Krieg decides to take pity on Claptrap and have him join the group in Roland's APC, despite him very clearly noting his association with a scumbag bounty hunter. But as you will discover, this quartet is actually a sextet, if the marketing of this movie was anything to go by. There is not much to glean from the action itself, apart from Roland's APC somehow being ambidextrous when it comes to handling, as he gives the wheel to Lilith while using the turret above to defend themselves. Yeah, not sure how that translates to the car itself being propelled, unless I'm to believe that a equivalent pedal and brake are on both sides of the car, but I guess it's the style over substance. This is compounded when Lilith gives Claptrap of all the ability to steer in the center while she helps Roland fend off the entourage. As you can also see from this shot, however, it's clear that there would be no way for Lilith to have kept the car moving from where she sat, or that Roland would have had to position himself incredibly awkwardly to get his legs on the pedal and brake. Claptrap inadvertently hits a hazard that would have totally lowered his heat level if he was in a different video game, but alas, is inconsequential to the entourage as the Stingrays destroy the APC turret, yet somehow doesn't cause any damage internally to the vehicle itself, letting Roland back control of the APC. The crew find themselves nearly boxed in, but not before Roland takes a detour into a crevasse, causing the APCs to crash in hilariously awful CGI. Like, seriously, this would be something I would see if I was playing Most Wanted, not in a goddamn movie. The path that Roland took is seemingly impassable for normal vehicles as they've stumbled in Piss Wash Gully, noting the 7th time they've paid lip service to the games. And if the insult wasn't already bad enough, we can add injury to that with Tina trying to roll a window up for air and Roland insisting she wouldn't until the guard gets blasted with a slurry of piss. Because of course, piss jokes are always funny when the joke is that piss is involved and nothing else. Just like how Borderlands 3 thought it was funny to make a rocket launcher that shoots poop, and that was the start and end of that horrible punchline too. See, this is faithful to the games, guys. Promise me. The urinal and fecal flanderization of the movie gets cut short as the APC gets wailed on by Thresher tails, as per the sign once they entered into Piss Wash Gully, until the crew has to stop at a cliff face. A giant Thresher looms up from the cliff face to meet the APC as Roland tries in vain to back up, only to find that the Atlas entourage has catched up to them from behind. Now, of course, with Roland having stopped, you'd fully expect the soldiers to come out guns armed, surrounding Roland, if anything about police pursuits has taught me, but no, they decided to wait for Roland to make his decision. You could have had the soldiers poised against the Thresher and Roland in such a way so that they couldn't immediately apprehend him, but hey, how am I to judge the fake tension of your drawn-out action scene? With little choice, Roland decides to punch it straight towards the Thresher, managing to get some lip off a ramp of the cliff face that didn't exist earlier in the shot, while shooting some rockets into the mouth of the Thresher such that they can jump straight through its exit wound. Also fortunate that there just happened to be a flat spot for them to land on the other side, as opposed to it being nothing but a chasm below, but I guess a flat tire is a consolation prize for having any consequences in this movie. The gang take a little respite from their excursion as Roland and Krieg attempt to replace the tire to the car, Lilith scouting in the distance. Lilith finds it perplexing that Atlas hasn't continued to pursue them, with Roland giving an excuse that Stingrays won't pursue without ground support. Yeah, that seems like a comical stretch given that it would be the opposite logic considering that Stingrays can avoid most, if not all, hazards on the ground, but whatever. This leads into a drama around Lilith's attempt to save Tiny Tina, who has to remind Lilith that she willingly went with Roland as opposed to being kidnapped. Jeez, Lilith, did that not occur to you, like, I don't know, at the start of Tina trying to kill you earlier? Tiny Tina also lets in that Mr. Atlas believes that she's the daughter of Iridia, and Lilith surmises that Roland only took Tina for his own selfish aims to plunder the vault. Lilith, having been doubtful as to the validity of this vault, shames Roland and the crew for trying to find this until Roland has had it with her bullshit and puts a gun on her, stating that he wants to ensure that Atlas can never get their hands on it. Now, this poses a very similar problem to the nature of chasing after the vaults in Borderlands 3 did, and if you remember, the Calypso's intent was to open the vault to reap the power of the monsters trapped in it held, meaning that it would be counterintuitive for our respective protagonists to A, open said vault, and B, collect all the vault pieces as opposed to having one and keeping that far away from their clutches. Furthermore, given that this vault is laid in Pandora, Tiny Tina poses a potential risk for every second that she's on Pandora for Atlas to reacquire her, which also means that if the situation calls for it, Roland would have to kill Tiny Tina to ensure Atlas's plans are foiled if he believes Tiny Tina is paramount to opening the vault. Not to say that Roland would jump on that choice first, but that's still something you would consider, but also consider that Roland didn't think to maroon Tiny Tina anywhere else but Pandora, the one place she would be pivotal towards opening that vault. So perhaps Lilith is correct in assuming that Roland's intentions are not as altruistic as he claims. Roland wants Lilith to disarm herself and take a long walk off a short pier, and Lilith states that as a result of being collateral in their chase sequence means she's good as dead, and that they reluctantly are all on the same side. Yeah, wonder how that happened, Lilith. Was it that you, for no reason, decided to protect Tina under no recourse of belief that Atlas would screw you over? Stupid decision aside, Roland mulls over wanting to pull the trigger, but relents, Lilith quipping that they'd better have a plan that didn't involve an extended chase sequence. The plan that Roland states involved a scientist who wanted Tina broken free and a means to collect the keys, with Tina already having one. Now, of course, why would they go collect all the keys to a vault they don't want Atlas to open? Who the fuck knows, because realistically it'd be better for them to either hide the key piece or destroy it if they must. Even Borderlands 1 story, as flimsy as it is, justified us wanting to chase the vault pieces despite Atlas wanting their grubby hands on it, as, in that story, we were just opportunistic people wanting a chance at wealth and glory. But here, we have just established that Roland has morals that don't align with Atlas such that he'll stop at nothing to keep them having that kind of glory, even if it's complete bullshit, yet won't bring himself to logically rid of the keys in a manner unrecoverable by them. Furthermore, the plan involves Roland and the gang heading to Sanctuary City to go meet up with this scientist. And why hadn't Roland and their gang been at Sanctuary already if they've not only been on Pandora for a whole month, but were living on the land at Tundra Express, and that the scientist supposedly wanted to see Tina once broken free? Again, a contrivance to allow Lilith to meet up and inexplicably team with them. Despite that you could have cut the entire sequence of Tundra Express and have Claptrap state that Tina's last known location was at Sanctuary instead, and fulfill the same plot beats there. The team ride onto Sanctuary City, or of plot and copyrighted music as it were, as Roland states they need to keep a low profile by wearing masks that are extremely bright, gaudy, and put more attention on the person than less of, to waltz in unabated by patrolling Atlas soldiers. I'm sure you're also wondering how these masks somehow fool Atlas soldiers like they're Oblivion NPCs, yet the gang can just wear their formal attire, and I say, how dare you think more than the writers did? Roland needs to locate his contact by way of talking with Mad Moxie, whom Lilith is somewhat familiar with. More of that in her bosoms later. We come across Marcus again, who's not the least bit fooled by Lilith's disguise, like seriously, who would be, by way of noting her iconic infinity pistol. Speaking of, I'm quite baffled that for a series having its mainstay being the wacky and eccentric weapons at present, this movie has taken little opportunity to make full use of them. Even noting that the Infinity is simply a gun with infinite ammo, basically every gun in this movie might as well function like the Infinity since no one reloads or ever runs out of ammo. Furthermore, I feel Lilith should be much more anxious around Marcus given that he's basically announcing her presence to a crowded bazaar of people and by association the rest of her crew. But who gives a shit about consequences in your movie, am I right? We segue into Moxie's bar and Mad Moxie herself, played by Gina Gershon in a completely uncompromising veneer to the video game counterpart. In fact, I think they might have over-exaggerated on Moxie's assets in comparison to the game, but I won't be mad that I have at least two things to praise about the movie now. Goonering aside, Mad Moxie has the group step into her office, but not before Roland gets accosted by some random Atlas soldier named Larry, played by Bobby Lee, in a performance I'm sure will be nothing but hilarity given his repertoire. And again, real good going, those masks don't work for shit other than on the unnamed characters of this movie. I'm sure you're also wondering why Roland would even entertain this fool instead of giving him the cold shoulder, but not only does he, but he removes his disguise and humors him instead of Moxie's meeting with the game too. Moxie and Lilith catch up on their past lives, with Moxie saying that
Probably don't remember me, but I sure remember you. Your mama was a good woman.
Yeah, well, wouldn't know.
For whatever it's worth. I'm real happy that you came back home. And I hope that you know how much your mama loved you. She always told me how special you were.
No, I appreciate the help.
while also detailing the whereabouts of this scientist the gang are looking for. Now, believe it or not, But Synthetic Man of all pointed this out. I was morbidly curious what he had to say about this movie, given his tendencies. But if Moxie had known Lilith and her mother personally, shouldn't Moxie be about the same age as Lilith's mother, other than being roughly the same age as Lilith? Unless Moxie is saying this in regards to when she was young, it wouldn't follow, but alas, this is a minor problem. What isn't a minor problem, of course, is what Lilith's mother described Lilith as, according to Moxie. And while you think this line is completely innocuous, as any parent would describe their progeny as special, even if they were huffing glue, this line has much more importance to let on, and it's absolutely hilarious what kind of secret the writers are holding back for those who even have a basal understanding of the Borderlands IP, much less those who are prime veterans of it. Back to Roland and his confounding decision to talk to this dude, we also get more foreshadowing as to Roland's relationship with Knox, of course, played up like a joke, given Bobby Lee only facilitates being a joke here. As it wasn't already painfully obvious, Bobby Lee's character was only here to pretend to be amicable to Roland until he has the opportunity to get the drop on him, but not before Moxie tases him and he and the gang hurry out as more Atlas soldiers hear the commotion. I'm sure you're wondering what will be the consequences of this, if any, for Roland to even play niceties with the enemy, and I say, consequences in a Borderlands movie? You must be out your goddamned mind! Moxie sells off, Larry being knocked out as a result of him succumbing to beer while the gang straddle on the indistinct alleyways of Sanctuary to their destination. Lilith isn't able to figure out the password to this elevator, so in comes Tina to figure it out by echoing the word echo. And with a password as stupid as that, I'm surprised this elevator didn't inadvertently open by any of the loud, booming acoustics surrounding it, but whatever, it's not like there is even a sensible reason as to why this elevator would be shuttered from the rest of this township anyway. Lilith begins asking questions about the scientist to Roland, questions that I feel she would have already asked from the beginning of this plan, but given Roland was also lapsed to tell her the name of the scientist just in order for it to be a dramatic reveal to Lilith, of course, the rest follow. Roland does warn the crew that the scientist has a tendency to say weird things and not to be turned off by it, and I'll have words to say about the weird things she actually says. As it also wasn't painfully obvious, this scientist is Patricia Tannis, coming as a complete shock to Lilith given their past history, and a shock to me given what she's currently wearing. Now, while I did goon for Moxie's marvelous memories, I find it oddly distracting that Tannis' cleavage is out just the same as her, despite never having those kinds of tendencies in any of her depictions in the games. So, I guess the very thing I praise this movie for is also something I have to dock points away from. The past history that Lilith and Tannis share is not exactly friendly, to the point that Lilith doesn't want to bother with her, even with Tannis' clinical address of their wanted posters, but Roland vouches for what Tannis says and has them lay low yet again to figure out their next move. I did find it peculiar that Kevin Hart, being the most comical of the cast chosen, has to play the straight man in a role unbefitting to him, and while admirable, Kevin Hart is only good when he's playing the comedy actor. Of course, the comedy is spared for Claptrap, who decides to take a electro shower and predictably short circuits from it, because, you know, dumbass doing dumbass things for dumbass reasons equals comedy with this show. Hey, maybe he and Adam can exchange numbers sometime. Anyway, Tannis' autism and cold delivery opens a drama she and Lilith share. Lilith states that her mother entrusted Tannis to protect her, but instead chose to chase after vaults, with Tannis countering that not only did she leave Lilith in the hands of tradespeople, but that she was instructed by Lilith's mother to do so, mainly as a means to survive. Now, all of this explanation as to what Lilith's mother instructed will all come at a head once the major reveal about Lilith rears in, but let it be known that it will make the least amount of sense for Lilith's mother to do what she did to ensure Lilith's safety. Even now, if Tannis wanted Lilith straddled off in order to fend for herself, wouldn't Tannis have left Lilith something for the two to communicate to one another? Also, why is Lilith finding it a surprise that Tannis is on Pandora if she thinks Tannis was too obsessed with chasing after a fantasy? Is there a reason that Lilith's mother couldn't have told her daughter any of this as opposed to Tannis? It also should be mentioned, despite never being brought up until much later, but Lilith at this very moment is a huge risk for this group given that she wanted Claptrap to fix her beacon, and as far as we've seen, she's yet to tell him to stop, so you'd think that Tannis would want to know why Roland ferried Lilith around if she only expected him, Krieg, and Tina to arrive here. Especially with Lilith's mouthing off at the concept of these vaults existing in the first place, meaning that her reasons to hop on board are purely out of her own survival and nothing more. Lilith takes a breather outside to ruminate as Tina steps out for the two to have a heart-to-heart. Alluding to Lilith being described as special, Tina also pipes in to remark that she was made special by way of Atlas. As though Lilith got hit with fucking Alzheimer's, she asks if Deucalion is her father, forgetting the numerous times Tina stated that she doesn't have a father. The dialogue also gets stupid, with Tina giving a non-answer and Lilith responding, "That's not a yes or no question."
Wow, who wrote this?
How the fuck else would you answer, "Is Atlas your father?" That doesn't involve a yes or a no, you dumb bitch. Shouldn't you say, "That doesn't answer my question," in regards to what Tina is saying instead? Tina elaborates that Atlas created Tina while she lampoons the same story premise we're already familiar with in regards to his obsession with the vaults, stating that Atlas had found a small piece of Iridian blood on a vault piece and used that to create Tiny Tina from it. Hoo boy, where to begin with this shit? So in the Borderlands games, the Iridians have been established to be an ancient race that are completely separate from the human race that succeeded them, and even with the ones that we do fight are nothing more than simulacra of their long dead masters. The inference from what Tina just spouted is that the Iridians are nothing more than an ancient human race, similar to the Forerunners from Halo, which is not only lame in terms of using the very peculiar design of the Iridians, but causes further problems for the opening monologue of the movie. First off, how does one anticipate a daughter of Iridia being born to open the vaults if ostensibly every descendant is a son or daughter of their parent, and so on and so forth, especially if the result of creating an Iridian amounted to a humanoid figure like Tina? Wouldn't that discovery spur a whole discussion into the nature of these Iridians being much more akin to us than simply being alien in nature? But if that is a result of doing this, then why would Atlas need Tina specifically, and instead just round up any random woman to attempt opening the vault to no avail? How can Atlas even ensure that Tina is most likely to open the vault if this is the case? Just because there was blood on an Iridian artifact? Even later in the movie, Atlas establishes that he can just make more clones like her, meaning that it's a complete faux pas for him to go looking for Tina or hiring Lilith to go look for her, if not only can he do this, but that by and large, any humanoid woman could if they are more or less blood related to Iridians. This also causes problems for Roland's daring rescue of Tiny Tina, as if Atlas has been poised to make clones of Tina, means that Roland's attempt to save her only stalls his attempt rather than outright stopping it at the source. However, this does slightly plug a hole I mentioned about Roland having to rectify killing Tina if need be, if she's essential to opening this vault, but it also means that Roland capturing Tina wasn't out of some moral righteousness, as Atlas could replace her. But with that in mind, the writers could have also rectified why the gang want to find and open the vault before Atlas, if Atlas can use another of his Iridian clones to go search for it, making what the gang are doing a race against time, but even with that fixing would still mean that the gang shouldn't need to go after the vault if they have even just one of the vault key pieces. Furthermore, with Tina's cloning in mind, the writers are trying to have their cake and eat it too, posing Tina as uniquely capable of opening this vault, yet simultaneously disposable to Atlas's own means. When Tina was mentioning the Iridian blood on that artifact, there is an implication that Atlas cobbled together an entire human with that artifact wedged somewhere in her, and that artifact just so happened to be one of the vault key pieces. Yes, that matter will be redressed between Tannis and Lilith later as dramatic tension once the group goes searching for that vault proper, but nevertheless means that the other clones were utterly worthless because of the specific means of which Tina was created. Does this also mean that Krieg and the other bandits we saw earlier were a result of these clones that failed and just being held for vague reasons too? Does that mean that all bandits and psychos are as a result of this mass cloning in mind, as opposed to stragglers of the corporate wars who were abandoned and left to their own devices? Is Atlas still making these clones despite not being pivotal towards opening this vault? Was Tina the first of their creations or made after other fetid attempts? The only thing Lilith has to say about any of these stark revelations is that Atlas is a real jerk for making Tina only to facilitate opening these vaults, foregoing that he could make anyone open these vaults if I understand about their own rules in the story. Tina starts to have an anxiety attack about the reminders of what Atlas did in those labs, with Lilith calming and reassuring her that they won't get her. Also foregoing that they're at the one planet that Tina would be most useful to them in, so good going there. Well, given the circumstances of Roland talking to an Atlas soldier out in the open led to nowhere, how do you expect the gang to compromise their position? Well, if you can fucking believe it, Claptrap is out wandering the streets in a painstakingly unfeeling manner, while Nox and Larry are out interrogating Moxie about her possibly tasing Larry. While Nox is trying to be tough to Moxie, Larry overhears Claptrap's commotion and lets Nox know that he's in cahoots with them, before Claptrap realizes he's given his position and runs away. Surely, you'd love to fucking know why the gang thought Claptrap was fine to let loose out on the streets, other than to contrive a way for him to be found in the most obligatory way imaginable, but unfortunately, you're wrong, because there isn't an explanation. And Nox and her soldiers proceed to clear the street to root out Scooby and the gang. With Tina and the first key secured, Tannis shows the gang a mining journal she recovered, which details an entry where the workers miscategorized an Iridian vault key as some sort of ancient pottery. Not sure how they could surmise this if the piece itself couldn't stand on its own, nor has any hollowness for soil to fit in, but regardless, the location is somewhere deep in Caustic Caverns, a location concerning for Roland, apparently. I'm sure you're wondering how Tannis was able to recover a mining journal from a place presumably dangerous, yet wasn't able to recover the whereabouts of this key or the key itself, since all she says is that she got it from some corporate bureaucrat, but those are distracting details that get in the way of the story the writers want to tell. Claptrap lets the team know of how he hilariously gave their cover away, while also lampshading more of that fling Roland and Nox has in the exposition, while Lilith yells at Claptrap about them spotting him in the commotion. Yeah, I'd be angry at Claptrap too, if not for the fact that Lilith and everyone allowed Claptrap to go into town unattended, so if anything, they should all be angry at themselves for this to occur. Despite Nox and her soldiers locking down Sanctuary, as I'm sure a somewhat subtle nod to what Commandant Steele does in the game, Nox not only gets distracted by Marcus's compliments, but also doesn't bother to check the very obvious dumpster smuggling our protagonists along a presumably locked down city. Yeah, so much for having consequences for your shitty actions once again, writers. The gang drive off to their next destination with a terribly overdrawn joke about Tannis using some self-cleaning device and neglecting to share it with the rest of the group, despite the fact that the group could have tried to clean some of the more noticeable grime off them before they got into this truck, but whatever. I shouldn't be surprised the jokes are as lazily slapped together as the plot of this story. The sinisterly silly six make it to Caustic Caverns with the gang cleaning some debris that leads into some kind of chute with all of them peering down on it. This was used a lot in the marketing material for some reason, and I can't help but think this was done as a symbolic omen to what the quality of the Borderlands IP has sunk down to. Or maybe the symbolism is that I'm the one being looked down on by the cast for being so critical of such corporate slop like it, because how would I know how to make a movie? I've never made one myself. Well, if I did make a movie, I wouldn't have collectively lost hundreds of millions of dollars on it, for one thing. Despite there clearly being a ladder for the gang to climb down, save for Claptrap, the group is reticent to go up until Roland just kicks Claptrap down the chute disgracefully. Now, while in any other circumstance involving Claptrap, I wouldn't hesitate to skullfuck him with every fiber of my being, but given that this Claptrap has been shown to be absolutely essential to Lilith's goal, such that she's in this unique position in the first place, I find it very odd that Lilith shares no care for his well-being. Moreover, and just how Claptrap would be essential to the rest of the group with his unique ability to access the Echo Net that no one else can apparently, or his nigh invulnerability to bullets, and long-lasting durability to the elements as well. Thinking about that, how is it that Claptrap is the only one of this kind if a rust bucket like him has stuck around for so long unattended? We segue to the group having climbed down the chute into some kind of corrosive spillway that they have to carefully navigate towards, as Tannis is explicit about how corrosive this waste actually is. This will be important for the next major action sequence, and more to the point of how PG-13 this movie is in the worst kind of ways. But going on, while the group aimed to shimmy around the catwalk, Tannis has Claptrap go an alternate route in a tunnel given his size, I suppose as to not account for him navigating this catwalk. There's a sequence where Lilith and Roland argue who should go first, with Tina taking the lead before nearly falling from the platform. She is inexplicably saved by Krieg, who somehow is teleported to her location despite moments earlier being right behind Lilith and Roland, without either of them noticing. Man, and I almost thought we'd have stakes or something in this movie. Thank God we didn't! Once the group make it to the door, we get even a semblance of a moment where Tina notices some bud growing through the cracks. That moment, of course, gets undercut by Claptrap with his self-flagellation of having unlocked the door as he continues to crush the flower with his wheel deliberately. Jeez, and I almost thought we'd have a theme in this movie too. The Borderlands games has always been a joke, save for the many times it wasn't. The gang go through a hall with some graffiti as Roland mentions that this is the doing of the Bloodshots, paying yet more lip service to the games with reckless abandon as Roland plays them up as being even more fearful than normal psychos, despite the fact that these psychos are completely indistinct from the ones we've seen in the movie. This is extremely indicative of just how little care the writers pay notice of the things they're referring to, as they could have simply looked at how the Bloodshots are depicted in the game in comparison to the other bandits and drawn from that. It also doesn't help that for the casual watcher, the only ideation of psychos we get in this movie is through Krieg and the few that Lilith stumbled upon, so it's not exactly helpful what Roland is saying here. Roland and Lilith scope out the deal with these psychos as they're out doing stereotypical psycho things, and find that there are simply too many for them to have the firefight with. Tannis also says that there isn't a way for them to blend in, save for Krieg, who gives a response that is genuinely the only thing in this movie that made me laugh a little, given the way he responds to that compliment.
Except you, handsome.
Thank you!
But you know what isn't funny? Not even the slightest, vaguest, most disillusioned way? What plan they go with. And the plan is that they'll have a distraction, posing Claptrap as the one to do it, and because I can't stand to have the suffering of what I just heard be laid solely on me, I'll have you, the audience, bear with me this utter travesty of writing.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. I am here because I want to be, and not for a more justifiable reason like trying to be a distraction. Even though it makes no sense for me to say what I'm about to say, and even though anyone rational would suspect it was just part of a crude plan, I have decided entirely on my own to say the following. Y'all bitches need to eat your own butts with your poopy mouth-assed faces until you die from loser poisoning like the stupid puss crotches that you is.
When I hear a sentence like this, something in the back of my mind beckons me to go through my knife drawer and find the dullest one, just so whatever effort and pain I went through to slit my wrist with it would still be less so than the feelings I had listening to what Claptrap just said. Now, barring the utter pathetic attempt this was as comedy, given that Claptrap already was a good distraction without it, means this doesn't work in the slightest, as all the psychos were bearing down on him without him even uttering a word. Secondly, if the psychos had even 2 neurons firing in their brain with what Claptrap said, would have obviously looked around to see if this was a trap, making me wonder how in the fuck the gang thought this would work with what Claptrap is saying. And how does this distraction work for Claptrap, yet Claptrap's assessment of the distraction for anyone else would wound up in failure? I don't fucking know, because I'm absolutely certain the writers only thought, and saying thought is being mighty generous, of the joke, and damn be the rest of it. Of course, the bandits unload on the claptrap of every bullet they got, as per the analogy of every gun functioning like the Infinity is noted here. Again, the neglectfulness of the gang treating Claptrap like a punching bag is also prominent, as they use his torment to go upstairs amidst this. Yes, despite me literally suggesting I'd hurt myself and purposefully prolong it because of Claptrap, I find it also incomprehensible why the gang treat him with such little regard other than meta for how the Claptraps are normally perceived in the games, given how helpful he's been up to this point. And against his own will too, no less. Claptrap manages to reunite with the gang despite the gang going upstairs. As you know, he can't climb stairs, and without further harassment from the bandits too, making me wonder if that distraction was even necessary. And oh, won't that get nipped in the bud a bit later too, but anyhow, we also discovered that on top of being practically immortal, that Claptrap is also a fucking chameleon, as he's able to shed his broken shell for a fresh one. Yet, this one also still has flaying of the paint after that onslaught. Christ, is there anything that can actually kill Claptrap at this point other than the corrosive goo? The gang jaunt over to some storage room and figured that the key must be in one of those crates, somehow untouched and disregarded by the bandits just a few floors below. Yeah, probably would have added more tension if one of the bandits used the key like a goddamn butt plug or something, as to figure how our protagonists get it, but here, they just have to play 52 card pickup with a bunch of boxes. As they tried to search, Roland and Tannis get up into semantics about the difference between raiders and psychos. I suppose is comedy for this scene, since Tannis has so far been portrayed to be more autistic than odd, but as I said, these writers could barely navigate through a playground slide, so the writing of course is equally as dulling. Lilith aimlessly searches about while leaving the gang to themselves, and after some time just inexplicably finds the vault key in the first box she bothers to open up. Now, in any normal circumstance, I will call bullshit on the other convenience and another consequence-free moment for this movie to have Lilith so easily find it, but knowing what I know, this isn't nearly as contrived as it's made out to be. Lilith lets the group know she found it, much to their utter bewilderment, with Lilith only assuming that it must have been luck that got her to find it. Lilith's attitude on this will cause an issue for what will transpire into the second act low point of this movie, even if intuitively that's all Lilith can say about how she found it. The gang are about to leave, but not before we are forced to endure Claptrap having a diuretic shit fit of the numerous bullets lodged into him. This is not only not funny in the worst kind of way, and seriously has me rethinking my life choices, but that, as a result of Claptrap needing to void his bullet bowels, that it makes a large enough ruckus for the Bloodshot Bandits to swarm our team. I mean, shit, wouldn't be the first time that a Borderlands story had a shitty joke either propel or quite literally stall the plot. So hey, maybe this movie is more faithful than it lets on. Frankly, limp-dick procession of action scenes while using the late Lenny Kilmister's music propelled the movie forward. You got bandits spawning from every possible and impossible place. You got Lilith spinning her guns or posing them for no fucking reason. You got infinite ammo, and of course, you got no blood, gore, or even impact of blows for that matter. Given that Borderlands as a series has never been shy to be grotesques, in ways that don't involve humor for one, I find it oddly perplexing that whoever directed this movie wanted to go for the PG-13 rating as opposed to going all raw and no rubber, yet didn't feel the same way about the dialogue being crass. Shit, even with Hazbin Hotel being as safe edgy as it was, at the very least didn't shy away from blood or gore where it could get it. So why here? I suppose they must have got it from the top brass to get more butts in seats, but given this movie could barely scrape a wheat penny with its box office, maybe it was preferable to not have ever made this movie in the first place. The gang managed through the chaos to get up some stairs and bottleneck the bandits with some flames and a grenade before we hard cut to them lackadaisical in the hallway, save for Roland for some reason. This shot also does a great job of showing when the choreography needs to be hidden over some shaky cam or dark interiors as our group gets accosted by glowies. No, not those kinds of glowies. Throughout. The sequence gets more dire as more bandits run head over heels to get shot. Yeah, lucky our group doesn't have to fight bandits who also have guns, despite the prior scene with them unloading on Claptrap. While we have weird cutaways, like this one where Claptrap is getting beat down on by all the midget bandits present, and while this may be petty, I'm going to call this another case of paying lip service, since this is the only time that midget bandits are even present in this movie. From the chaos, Tannis is able to guide them towards an elevator as their way out of this mess, with the group following close behind. To their duress, however, is that the power lines to the elevator has been cut, which means Tannis and Claptrap need time to fix while the rest fend off the oncoming horde. Roland and Krieg opt to be the front line while Lilith and Tina hold the back, and the fervor emphasis of how PG-13 this movie is noted here, as the pipes on this hallway also contain that corrosive goo, not sure how they were able to if this goo was able to corrode metal, that Roland shoots to harm the bandits. But as opposed to quite literally burning or ripping the flesh from it, it's at best a mild irritant to the ensuing bandits, because apparently I wanted to watch a wholesome Christian Minecraft movie, for crying out loud. Meanwhile, Lilith tries to lock out some bandits but gets caught between the bars until Tina comes in to help while she's disarmed. And in the business, this would be character growth for the two, but given how little time they've had to bounce off one another, is meaningless. Time is of the essence as our group is finding themselves cornered with only a steel bar their window. They assume the elevator is operational, but discover that there is yet more wires unconnected, which prompts Roland to make a heroic sacrifice and leave the group behind to ensure their safety. Tina expectantly is upset that she'll lose the only person who risks his neck out for her at every turn, with Roland only giving assurance that he'll meet her there, as Tina gives him a bunny nade as his last-ditch effort. Now, for all my haranguing of the prior times this movie has tried to play with my nostalgia strings, this one is especially damning because not only has this movie not deserved this payoff with our understanding of these two, but are relying on what you do understand of them in the games to have the same emotional baggage of this scene. It's one thing to shamelessly rip something from the games and use it as your own, but it's another to shamelessly rip something, use it as your own, and manipulate the audience's prior understanding of the thing to get the same effect. This is doubly excruciating for what will transpire after this sacrifice, but to enlighten you, this movie has yet to go over why Roland bothered to save Tina other than for having a conscience. Why Tina feels so strongly her bond with Roland that wasn't out of opportunism, what the two get out of this exchange that isn't just sticking their dick in Atlas's salad, or what they'll do with their lives once successful. Maybe if we hadn't spent time fucking about with stupid distractions, or discussed the difference between raiders and psychos, or had a piss-spewing sequence in the car, that we could have had scenes to build up characters, but given the collective intelligence of the writers of this movie would make a koala blush, they more than likely confused character with caricature. So in Roland makes his last stand as the bandits break through the bar in CGI-laden fashion, with the bunny blowing up the hallway of the currently ensuing bandits. So, was Kevin Hart not even capable of just throwing a real bunny plush that they had to CGI this too? Or was it not throwing the way that they'd like? Whatever, more bandits flood and eventually overwhelm Roland, and the resolution as to his survival is left at a cliffhanger, but I think it's safe to say that he's dead. Otherwise, that emotional payoff would have been all for naught, right? Surely, with all the other times the writers have undone their own shitty consequences to their shitty actions, that this time they'd have the knack to commit to this, right? Yeah, we'll get to that. Supposedly, the elevator got overwired as it's barreling upwards at a speed fatal to the group as they near their ascent, but managed to be saved by them being phase-walked out of there. Tina naturally assumes, what with her being a daughter of Iridia, that it was her who did it, with a line that I'm sure was inspired by such titans of writing like Forspoken of all. Lilith is the only one who projectile vomits from that, and this is important, if you can believe it, for the reveal later, while Tina can't fathom how she was able to accomplish that feat. Tina, of course, is still concerned about Roland, while Lilith tries to reassure her, although if I am to believe that he was sacrificing himself to save the others, that Lilith is only saying this to soften the blow, but given what I know what happens, alas, maybe Lilith was being more sincere than I believed. Tannis can only surmise from the whereabouts of their teleportation that they are in some kind of old mine, and the gang opt to coop up in said mine before planning their next move. As day becomes night, Tina is plumb tuckered out while Tannis fuses the two pieces of the vault key together. The result of this combo also, conveniently enough, shows them the location of where this vault on Pandora is, and while this is in line with what the Pandora and vault key did in the games, what it didn't do was tell you the specific location of said vault, only that a vault or vaults were or weren't present on said planet. But again, this is a narrative shortcut, like with Claptrap's inexplicable ability to tell Lilith where to find Tina after having no leads. Lilith is baffled by this, given her doubts earlier, while also remarking on the Firehawk symbol, because of course you take the most absurd thing for Borderlands 3 and implant that here, that Tannis exposits is the mark of an Iridian goddess who protects his planet. Now, of course, the immediate question becomes as to where this goddess is doing leaving this planet to ruin, if I am to believe that this daughter of Iridia would make things right with said planet, a concept the writers also fuck up, considering Pandora was made deliberately a wasteland to keep people from poking further into it to find the vault. Of course, the answer won't be found with a movie as terribly written as this, as the nature of Pandora is the way that it is, to facilitate extremely shallow social commentary, and worked backwards to justify that through line. While Lilith is amazed by all this, finds that this will be all for naught if they don't find the third piece. Tannis then lets Lilith know that Tina is the third piece, vindicating what Tina implied earlier about that bloodied artifact being infused into her. Tannis knows that Tina must be, as a result of what she did in that elevator earlier, getting Lilith to question what will happen if Tina opens it, if she is essential towards opening it. Tannis explains to Lilith that
When the daughter of Iridia places the key, the pieces are consumed and the vault opens. Now, I don't necessarily believe that means kill her.
But you're prepared to take that risk.
Well, we have no choice. Either we take her, or Atlas does. There is no salvation without sacrifice.
with Lilith only grimacing at that prospect. Once again, we have a lot to say about how dumb this is. So, compounding what I already grieved earlier in regards to the key pieces, there is no reason for our group to go out collecting the pieces as opposed to destroying or hiding away the one they already have, if this is the only way for any person to go looking for it. You know, the classic, no one should be allowed to have this kind of power trope in movies done a million times over. More so than that, but this potential sacrifice that Tannis is willing to make to Tina is all an affront to open the vault before Atlas does, as opposed to reaping the vault for all it's worth more than Atlas could. And given Atlas is a mega corporation and our scrappy heroes are out on the lam, they have infinitely more ways to take advantage of the resources in that vault than they could conceivably to fight back against Atlas. Because it's not like Atlas could just wait for you to lead them directly to the vault and open it or something. Boy, wouldn't that be utterly retarded for Tannis not to consider that Atlas would be more poised to let you do the work for them, you useful idiot. Furthermore, if Tina is worth the sacrifice for the greater good, then again, wouldn't it be more pertinent just to kill her right now in her sleep with 2 bullets to the back of the head, and thus getting rid of any potential for Atlas to open it even if they found the other 2 pieces? I mean, Tannis tries to play niceties around the idea of Tina being killed as a result of opening the vault, so it's not like that option is out of the window unless Krieg somehow rejects to such an extent. I also don't get why Lilith would be opposed to this, as though she somehow grew attached to Tina such that this would be an issue for her. She certainly didn't mind just capturing her to leave to Atlas's own devices for how short-lived that is, but given that Lilith also decided to risk her neck out for Tina when it came to Nox, maybe this is consistent for her to have quick attachments. But enough of that shit. We cut back to the elevator hallway with a bunch of dead bandits, and wouldn't you fucking know it, Rowan is alive. So on top of emotionally manipulating your audience by taking advantage of nostalgia for what transpired in Borderlands 2, on top of trying to bait a cliffhanger on that emotional beat, and on top of gaslighting the audience that these two even had a semblance of a relationship, but you couldn't even commit to the one thing in this wretched shit stain of a story that could have meant something? And how Roland will even reconvene with the group given they teleported in some random fuck-off location will have to be saved for later, but rest assured, it won't make sense like the rest of this movie. So Tina and Craig are still having their nap while Lilith peers onward, uncertain as to the necessity of killing Tina to get a one-up on Atlas. This moment of introspection again is cut short by fucking Claptrap, who reminds her and the audience about that beacon that Lilith wanted fixed earlier. So yeah, good going that Lilith didn't bother to tell anyone else of the group that Claptrap was doing this in the background. If Lilith decided to inadvertently switch sides again, would be real awful if what the group have been trying to do could be upended right here. Even Lilith grabs the beacon and looks back at Tina as though having second thoughts about all of this. Not sure what Lilith thinks trying to get back at the good graces of Atlas would do for Tina's well-being if they were just going to throw her to the vault meat grinder like Tannis was, but that would require Lilith to think farther ahead than the immediate. She waltzes away and ponders the beacon for a moment, ultimately crushing it against the wall. This is all for naught, however, as a Atlas drone flies over to her location, with Deucalion greeting her with her disapproval of her breaking that beacon. As it unfortunately turns out, that beacon was an active tracking device that allowed Atlas to keep a lead on them the entire time. So the question then becomes, how the fuck did Nox know that Lilith had found Tina at Tundra Express, as opposed to going there next to look for clues? Was it only by inference of it being previously destroyed that they assumed something was amiss? Because that isn't an assurance of anything. For all they know, Lilith could have accidentally stepped on it while being no closer to finding Tina or that vault. In fact, how does Atlas even know that Lilith is with Tina at this very moment? Because Lilith decided to be in cahoots with Tina? For all Atlas is concerned, Roland could have had Lilith booked it alone after that chase sequence, unless they somehow also figured out that Claptrap was in direct association with Lilith given his presence at Sanctuary? Moreover, if it was Atlas's intention to use Lilith as a tracking device to find Tina, then why is Atlas announcing his motivations here as opposed to keeping Lilith under the pretense she has to push the button in order to send a distress call, and then flush the group out when she's destroyed it again? Does Atlas do this for every person they hired to go find Tina? Because if so, how would they know if any one person they're tracking is any closer to finding Tina? If pushing the button is the way for Lilith to let Atlas know that she found Tina, then how was Nox and her soldiers so confident that Tina was at Tundra Express without Lilith pushing it? How is Atlas at this very moment? All this and more further erode the chasm that is this story, such that Atlas only got as far as they did to finding Tina and the vaults because Lilith decided to be a klutz with the fucking beacon. This isn't even going into the nature in which Atlas announces his presence, as opposed to supposedly needing goons to assert his guise like Fat Boy earlier, which means for no discernible reason, Atlas got a bunch of his own goons killed by a crazy bitch, as opposed to addressing her with a seemingly innocuous drone. And given that Promethea is Atlas's main hub, Atlas would have no issue in doing this at the bar. Lilith threatens to Atlas as she'll destroy the key, with Atlas counter-threatening that he'll kill her merry band of heroes in a slow and painful death. And honestly, sounds like a good deal all things considered if we're to believe that Atlas having this technology is bad news for the whole galaxy. And even if Atlas is good on his word, Lilith still would have a window to warn the others to get their asses up and hightail it out here, if the prospect of opening the vault before they do was still on their mind. But alas, Lilith decides to dribble the idiot ball and relents to Atlas, with Tina awake and aware of this shady deal being made. What is this? Drama in my meaningless dopamine a minute movie? Call me shocked and appalled that this movie dare have me not just watch the pretty colors for once. Even more than that, Atlas tells Lilith that with her relenting to him, that he'll send payments rendered. Meaning that Not only was Lilith completely dipshitted for trying to protect Tina from Nox under belief they reneged on the deal, but that in spite of having done so to subvert Atlas, that Atlas was still willing to pay her for finding Tiny Tina. Lilith's only excuse was implied by Nox wanting to take Tina in personally, as opposed to Lilith calling the beacon as was initially asked, as to also imply that Nox's motives are different from Atlas's, which shouldn't matter to Lilith if she was going to get paid either way. We're just supposed to assume that Lilith, in fighting Krieg and having a standoff with Tina, that she suddenly grew a conscience towards Tina, and not that the writers wanted to have their dynamic sextet in the laziest and counterintuitive way imaginable. Lilith sees that Tina saw all this unfold, Lilith trying desperately to squirm a justification her way, with Tina only remarking that she'll open the vault and use whatever is inside to kill Atlas with it, while giving Lilith a parting gift of grenade for her betrayal. Yeah, Lilith could have told Tina that she'll die trying to open the vault and that Tannis doesn't care about her well-being, or that going to that vault is stupid with Atlas tracking them this far, but nah, Lilith just stutters into being stunned for an explanation. The next sequence here is a bit awkward as we hard cut back to black, with Lilith having been presumably knocked out by that explosion. Lucky for her, it was only a grenade filled with melatonin, I suppose. Claptrap was also left behind, or at least stayed behind given his programming forced him to. Again, a bit perplexing that if Tina believes that Lilith, and technically Claptrap, betrayed the group, that they wouldn't have finished the job on them, but oh well, I guess we just have to take it at face value that Tina believed that grenade killed her, and damned if Claptrap cares about that. Claptrap lets Lilith know that the other three of the group found a truck at a village and left, getting Lilith to question the wording of that and investigate this village. This village is apparently quite familiar to Lilith as she walks around and gets hit with a deluge of flashbacks to when she was young. And we can discuss the nature of these flashbacks more once all of them have nestled in this scene. Anyhow, Lilith walks into one of the dilapidated trailers and finds some more of those digital photographs, somehow still working after some 36 years with only slight tearing. This area is also familiar to Claptrap as he goes into a factory reset while relaying a deluge of exposition via a hologram of Lilith's mom, who reveals that...
So sorry that I sent you away. I didn't want to, but as soon as I realized what you are, what you might become, I knew you'd never be safe here in Pandora. But if you ever return, I've made sure that Claptrap will find you. Help you understand your destiny.
Now, this is going to be a lot to take in from this, as it's not immediately apparent what Lilith discovers from this. But let it be known that the reveal is the most absurd thing that this movie tries to pull for anyone who has even a cursory understanding of the games. But for now, let's go into the flashbacks and what Lilith's mom entails. Now, one of the flashbacks that Lilith has walking about shows her mother handing Lilith over to a younger Tannis as they leave in some cargo ship of some kind with her mother not coming along. There is nothing in this flashback to suggest that the cargo ship was incapable to bring Lilith's mother to, nor is it clear as to why this commune was bombarded upon, other than the possibility that Atlas and or bandits caught wind of someone special being around here. Of course, Lilith losing her mother was supposed to be an emotional moment for her, and damned how the fuck they get it. But even worse than that, given what Lilith's mother says about trying to keep her as far away as Pandora as possible, why was this detail not espoused to her by Claptrap the moment she came across him, as opposed to some extremely convoluted scavenger hunt by way of the old commune she shacked at? How could Lilith's mom ensure Lilith even find this commune, given that only by happenstance of that teleportation did it get her remotely close to it? Does that also mean that the only reason Lilith's mom stayed behind was to jury-rig this Claptrap in the off chance that Lilith decided to return, with no certainty as to whether this Claptrap would remain functional, or if Lilith would return? And had her mom tried to keep her away from Pandora, couldn't she, I don't know, told fucking Tannis that at any point, instead of hedging her bets on some piece of technology that can somehow sense when Lilith arrived on Pandora at any moment. Why did Lilith's mom told Tannis to throw Lilith to the tradespeople to learn to fend for herself, but not to not go back to Pandora because of what she knows about Lilith? And most important of all, why did Lilith's mom not told Lilith any of this info either to her in person at any point or through some kind of message log as a reminder? Why was Lilith's mom being purposefully obtuse to the only person she needs to ensure not to go to the very planet she deliberately got her out of, such that she needed this frankly contrived contingency? All of this was to make it an emotional moment for Lilith, such that not even Cate Blanchett can even work a tear in, considering her face is already plastered with enough makeup to suffocate a donkey, that the writers have bended the story backwards to this payoff, and damn be the methodology of this payoff making any lick of fucking sense. And once we do discover what Lilith figured out from this, will make this already wretched fecal matter of a movie more despicable. I do find it hilarious how Lilith says, "Tina," upon her realization, as though Tina wasn't already in dire straits from what Tannis believed would happen to her, and that Lilith was so distracted by her side quest that she forgot about her. Tina, Krieg, and Tannis scale down some cliff face and reach the location of the vault, Krieg being the only proactive member of the group as he manages to find the pedestal for it before they do. Given that they had to clear out some rubble earlier to find a hatch to Caustic Caverns, they would also assume that it's likely buried as well, but I guess it's nice to have Krieg do anything in this story. Tannis gives Tina the key piece with a look of apprehension on her face, and then only now letting Tina know that doing this might kill her. Yeah, imagine if Tannis said this at any other point prior to the pivotal moment of the key being planted, might have gotten Tina a bit reluctant to go through with this, but with them at the vault now, it's about on par with someone regretting killing someone the moment they are about to strike the killing blow. It's also nice that apparently Tina thinks she'll live through this with her being built different, because so much for having the potentiality of drama to surface from that. So Tina consigns herself to death as she stands on the podium, but alas, nothing happens. Tina wasn't that special after all. Before we can figure out who is the special one, take a wild fucking guess. Atlas and crew were standing behind in anticipation of her either opening it or discovering it for them, priming the exact thing I complained about earlier for Tannis not considering for one iota. But even with that, how did Atlas know where the vault is? Did they always know? Presumably Atlas needed that beacon functional for them to get even as close as they did to it, but by what Atlas knows, he doesn't have a clue as to the exact location of the vault or where our scrappy heroes went after Lilith destroyed the beacon. Unfortunately, much won't get explained in the last 20 minutes of this movie as the bullshits per minute start reaching Mach 1. Along with Atlas, he's accompanied by Nox, some soldiers, and bandits peculiarly enough, as well as Mouthpiece for some reason too. Now I am going to assume the arrangement Atlas made with these bandits went only as far as finding Tina and paying them in some amounts of money, but as for what arrangement the bandits get here is a bit befuddling, given that Atlas wouldn't be one poised to share the technology of the vault with a bunch of psychos, but might as well have all the antagonist's forces team up in the climax of your movie with no rhyme or reason to it, right? Atlas is also guarded by a giant ship with some large cannon poised down on them, just to make sure these plucky three have no shot in hell to stop them. Yeah, about that in a moment. Atlas tells Nox that he wants Tina on ice to prepare the next clone for their next attempt at opening the vault. Other than having Nox, Tannis, or any other woman try to open it, if I am to believe the humans are merely descendants of Iridians, but that squaring the circle is a foregone conclusion at this point. Before Atlas can begin with his preparations, in comes Roland to save the day by shooting him in the chest? Even disregarding the nonsense of how Roland even knew to go here given he wasn't in the know on the vault, what was Roland's plan if he was successful in killing Atlas? Did he think he was going to outgun a bunch of soldiers, bandits, and Apparently Roland did, and had an account for Atlas having something equivalent to the shields from the game, which I think would be hilarious a thought to consider that Roland's only plan was to kill the head honcho and damn be the rest. Atlas orders the group killed. Apparently putting Tina on ice is out of the question now, and there's a pretty hefty pause between when Atlas says this and when the group does it, giving Nox just enough time to order her men to stand down, as she suddenly grows a conscience for this. And what happens next is just too funny for me not to show you guys in ways that wasn't intentional for once.
Roland, you were right. I should have...
I don't know what I find funnier, the sudden and abrupt way that Nox goes out, or the insistence of this movie to expect me to care by Roland's reaction, as though these two had anything to work off one another, or that I should be surprised that Nox would do this. Even more absurd is that if Atlas is able to use the ship to send orbital bombardments down like this, why hasn't he for this group if he wanted them killed? But before we can even let this moment sink, in comes Lilith and Claptrap to object while Lilith threatens Atlas to let her friends go. And then, in we discover that Lilith is a siren, or specifically, the daughter of Iridia by way of her entrance. Now, hypothetical audience that I'm assuming you have this thought are probably thinking, wait, I vaguely remember watching the trailer for Borderlands 1 and seeing that hot girl doing these magical abilities. And you'd be right. In the games, Lilith being a siren never was, nor has it ever been, a secret in the games. So why in the fuck this movie would try to drum this up as a secret is most baffling, not even for the people who only stumbled ass first into the IP with this fucking movie, but especially for the people who played these games from the very beginning. From the very start of watching this movie, I was fully expecting for Lilith to have siren abilities based on my prior conceptions, but given that this movie has betrayed all of them at this point, maybe it was a fool's errand had I done so. But seeing as the movie tried to subvert my expectations by actually not subverting it means this movie really thought this was a profound reveal relying on your prior understanding of the games. I don't know how to describe such a rug pull of a move like this, but calling it the I was just pretending to be retarded of story writing is the best I can do. Once Lilith makes her statement, we get a bevy of flashbacks to contextualize how Lilith is and how she discovered she was the daughter of Iridia. We see the crude drawing of the Firehawk Lilith drew when she was younger, what Mad Moxie said about her mom describing her as special, Lilith inexplicably finding the second vault piece, and of her teleporting the gang out of the elevator along with her puking afterwards. Now, before we delve into this, I do find it funny how Lilith tells Tannis that she could barely remember her mother's face at the age she was, which defenders of this movie, if any, would counter to my previous complaint of her mom never telling her anything of import, when in the flashbacks, Lilith has quite the vivid memory of her mother's face, as well as the events of her losing her mother. So, good job on the consistently inconsistent nature of this movie. But now that it is all but confirmed that Lilith is the daughter of Iridia puts into even greater emphasis just how ass backward her mom was in preparing her to survive and be kept secret from would-be opportunists. Not just in never vying to keep her away from Pandora, never telling Tannis to keep Lilith away from Pandora, but using a robotic doorstop as your only contingency plan to inform Lilith any of this, and not even that, if we're being honest. But there's more problems with this revelation. How did Lilith's mom know Lilith was the daughter of Iridia? Lilith never once uses her abilities in the flashbacks when she was younger, and only by happenstance years later does she use it. Her mom, as far as we know, had no access to the vault keys to telepathically tie Lilith to them if we believe she can naturally sense them, and whether Lilith was drawing the Firehawk out of instinct or what her mother told her about the Firehawk wouldn't clue her in. If her mom did know that Lilith was the daughter of Iridia, why wouldn't Lilith's mom also naturally assume she could be the daughter of Iridia by bloodline? Although, I do suspect that Lilith's mom is not Lilith's mom biologically speaking, as there is no father present in the flashbacks, and Lilith's naturally occurring red hair stands in stark contrast to her mom's faded blonde hair. If that is the case, would then come into the question of how Lilith's mom discovered Lilith, and of her being a daughter of Iridia, seeing as the compound they were in was some kind of doll refinery given this background shot, as well as the brand on the trailer that Lilith walks into. I should also mention that for some reason, as a result of Lilith discovering she's the daughter of Iridia, that she somehow has understood how to apply and use her abilities such that we'll go into once our final combat scene rears in. If I had just discovered today that I had telekinesis, I really fucking doubt that I would be able to know how to use it that wasn't just out of my understanding of how telekinesis worked in other fictional media. So how Lilith does, given her reaction to using them for the first time here, is again baffling. It makes what Ava did in Borderlands 3 somehow tame in comparison to fast-tracking our characters' understanding of a powerful ability they've never had before, like what Lilith does here. Tina, through what I can only assume is out of some deep-seated envy, is disappointed to find that she's not the special one, with Lilith clarifying she's special in her own way. Yeah, special in the back of the short bus department if you ask me, given Tina absolutely should be more grateful that Lilith is trying to save them, the jealous cunt. Lilith tells Atlas that if she opens a vault, that he'll promise to let Tina go free. Odd she's not extending that to the rest of her crew, with Atlas clarifying that if she does, she'll let all of them go. Now, barring that Lilith was apparently fine with Tannis, Krieg, and Roland being left to Atlas's own devices go, and barring that Atlas is sometimes a bit deceptive when it comes to making deals, the way he states this deal makes it sound like he's 100% sincere in honoring the deal. I mean, he was still willing to pay Lilith for finding Tina even after Lilith had obstructed him, so surely this should be on Lilith's mind when she does this. This will be important for what happens next. Apparently, Tannis just figured out that Lilith's mom wanted Lilith to be taken far away from Pandora so that she wouldn't open the vault, which not only is contradictory to Lilith's mom programming Claptrap to help Lilith when she got on Pandora, but confirming that Lilith's mom never told Tannis to do so. Great going there, Lilith's mom. Had you just told Tannis that, none of this would be happening, and that you wouldn't need to force Claptrap into the story like cyanide to a double agent. In fact, if Atlas hadn't hired Lilith to go look for Tiny Tina, none of this would be happening, which is quite the stroke of luck for Deucalion to hire the one person who just so happens to be his ticket to opening the vault. Meaning that, if Lilith had refused to deal that Atlas would be no closer to finding nor opening the vault. Lilith's justification for opening it to Tannis is reusing a line that Tannis used to justify potentially killing Tiny Tina to get a one-up on Atlas. And yeah, how did that work for Tannis exactly? What with all the Atlas dudes behind them? Whatever. The logic already went out the window and crossed state lines, so no expectation that this movie is going to stay cogent. Lilith gives some sophistry to Tina about her opening the vault and how memories are more powerful than anything Atlas can create. A through line that has not been foreshadowed by either character talking, so again, meaningless. Lilith slaps down that vault piece, stands on the podium, and the archways of the vault reform from it. Lilith gets levitated and charged from the vault, flaying her jacket and giving her a fresh pair of wings. As she's floating, Atlas gets a bit impatient about her not opening the vault, ensuing the combat with Lilith blowing him and a few of his goons back. As I stated earlier, it seems Atlas was good on his word even if Lilith ideally doesn't want him opening that vault, so it's a bit odd that Lilith would do this with no way to ensure the safety of her friends, but alas, nonsense is the bread and butter of this movie. More to that, in spite of Lilith quite violently pushing Atlas nearly to his death, none of the soldiers shoot at her or her friends or attack them. This gets emphasized when Mouthpiece throws Tina into the chasm, Lilith shoots some kind of projectile, and the goons wait with bated breath what resulted from this for a good 20 seconds. And this consequence-free moment is dallied with more consequence-free moments as the projectiles Lilith shoots at gives her friends a protective bubble, making them impervious to any kind of damage. Boy, thank God there were no stakes in this story. For a moment, I almost thought I had to care about our protagonist being in danger or something. So Tina lobs grenades, Roland shoots carefree, Krieg bashes mouthpiece, Claptrap pays more lip service as he fells foes even without the protective bubble, but given Claptrap was already impenetrable to gunfire already, I don't think we need to make a god out of this thing, do we? In short, the fight choreography is at the worst it can get, given the enemies have about as many brain cells as they do opposable thumbs with the way they get easily felled here. The only semblance of stakes is that Atlas uses the cannon from the ship to knock down Lilith, getting her to recoil a bit before she properly gets knocked down as she tries to ram into the ship that also has this shield that Atlas has. From Lilith being knocked down, the protective bubble wears off, with Tina hanging for dear life, Mouthpiece getting a 1-up on Krieg, and Rowan presumably having finally ran out of ammo on his gun? Anyhow, Tannis coerces Lilith to wake up before she does and gets her second win on Atlas in that ship. Atlas opts to use the cannon to draw some kind of focus fire beam that Lilith blocks and redirects the beam back into the ship, imploding it. I should also add that our other heroes, save for Tina, get their own second win that has nothing to do with them having to protect the bubble, seeing as it's almost as though Roland and Krieg are fighting in completely different areas at times, what with the choreography not taking into account their presence. As the ship crashes, everyone has to run away from the impact and the collective dust and rubble forming from it. As the dust settles, Roland calls out looking for Tina, while Tannis is bemused by Lilith's presence, calling her a siren for what I assume is only to wave to the audience and nothing more. And yeah, this is paying lip service for as petty as this is, given that they have yet to even establish the difference between being a siren and being a daughter of Iridia. The fate of Tina is currently in Atlas's hands, figuratively and literally, as he bargains Lilith to take him to the vault. Lilith quietly obliges as Tina, Deucalion, and she enter. Not sure why the rest of the crew don't bother to follow in suit, but I can only assume that Lilith specifically has to drag you into the vault, what with her being the daughter of Iridia. What follows from the three's entry is a vault with a nondescript amount of technology, at least according to Atlas. It's also peculiar that in spite of the three of them entering at the same time, that Lilith is suspiciously absent, while Atlas still has Tina in his death grasp. Anyhow, Atlas does describe this Iridian technology as unbelievable when Lilith appears, and what he says and what I see don't really follow, as the vault amounts to nothing more than a series of floating cubes. Given that Atlas's technology in this movie is such that he can project his face on a neck collar, remotely power giant ships, and has auto shields that make him impervious to damage, you'd think this wouldn't be that impressive, but even so, the movie has to make the audience believe that this kind of technology is somehow beyond what Atlas was even capable of, and that we can't just take it by Atlas's word that it is. But alas, the theme of this whole sequence, if you can call it that, is Deucalion is never satisfied, at least espoused by Lilith, who decides to be unusually cryptic and spooky around him in order to disarm one of his devices that gives him the auto shields. Now, I'm a bit perplexed these things would still work in a place like this if I am to believe the vaults take you to a seemingly different dimension altogether, unless these devices run on their own internal battery source that somehow facilitated the same shielded design of the ship, but honestly, that's the least of this movie's problems. So with that, gives Tina the opportunity to fight back against Atlas, as she and Lilith consign him to death by way of some spooky tentacles that come and engulf him into the abyss. Now, given that Lilith only just moments ago discovered she was the daughter of Iridia, how is Lilith acting all blasé about seeing a fucking eldritch being coming out of the ground? She even says a line that implies she knows what was actually inside the vault, when the whole point of vying for the vault was that no one knew what was in it. And while these tentacles are alluding to the destroyer, there is no mention of it, nor does it make sense for there to be a destroyer if this vault also presumably has technology inside of it. Why is Tina not in the least bit surprised about this being here either, given what little she knows about the vault, and with her being merely a failed clone of opening this vault? I know this movie is absolutely pressed for time in terms of its pacing, but here, there should be absolutely no reason to cut corners on the very thing that every character was chasing after, but they do because once again, taking advantage of your preconceived notions about the games feels as though they don't need to do the busy work of crafting their own narrative without ghost writing off another's. Just a few more minutes of this god-awful movie. So after the villain's defeat, we cut back to Sanctuary in a celebratory splendor of fireworks, while we also get to see a blink and you miss it cameo by way of Ellie and Scooter present to celebrate. I mean, what else can I say about this that I haven't already ragged on about how desperately this movie wants to plug every member berry out of you? Anyhow, the gang all clamor on the balcony with Lilith giving some spiel about how Pandora is safe now with her being the guardian of it. An Iridian guardian, if you will. Sorry, a bit of this movie's trying to pay lip service rubbed off on me. The gang, save for Tina and Lilith, go group up with the party to join the festivities, and as though this movie couldn't help itself, it twists the knife just one more time with Tina coaxing Lilith to flame on and mark the sky with her Firehawk symbol. I wish I had another funny analogy to committing self-harm in regards to this, but at this point, all I can say is, kill me. And that was the Borderlands movie front to back. There have been a lot of bad movies that I've watched in my time. Manos, The Hands of Fate, Invasion of the Neptune Men, Ghostbusters 2016, Lucy, you name it. But at the very least, those movies were made with the notion of having some kind of meaningful through line, beginning and end, setup and payoff, action and consequence, as you would expect of a movie. Borderlands is not like those kinds of movies. It is as though this movie was made by a robot having only begun conceptualizing what a movie is, and through that, saw fit to dangle the mangled skin of Borderlands along with it. This movie is soulless, heartless, dickless, worthless in many a measure, parading the desiccated corpse of the Borderlands IP along with it in some kind of vain pursuit to match up to its betters. And every attempt to have any kind of moment, theme, or meaningful consequence is undercut by a shitty joke, quip, or a refusal to engage in the narrative it's trying to present to me. All the while, the story it's telling outside of your understanding of the IP is buried in a myriad of contrivances, conveniences, smatterings of nostalgia baiting, and reliance on nostalgia to carry its cold, dead plot forward. But fret not, motherfuckers, because if you thought this would be the death knell of the Borderlands IP, Gearbox, like a thief in the night, announced Borderlands 4 soon after to reinvigorate potential hype for the series going forward, given the tumultuous nature of Borderlands 3's, and by extension, New Tales' story. I have a lot of apprehension regarding the direction this sequel will take it, given that Ava is the goddamned commander of the Crimson Raiders by Lilith's decree, and I only see this as a vain attempt to satiate fans after being subjected to the live-action movie, but time will tell if this will truly forgive much of the complaints regarding the story writing of both Borderlands 3 and the live-action movie. Now, there's a question that I've been presented by friends and family as I've endured breaking this down. Why would I go out of my way to watch something that I know was going to be bad? Whereas the Wednesday show had barely any buzz about it, positive or negative, and the Has-Been Hotel show still has a bevy of die-in-the-wool fans and defenders of it, the Borderlands movie had not a single person stick its neck out in defense of it. So in a way, you'd likely see my breakdown of it as nothing more to me being a dead horse, as you'd likely reach a similar conclusion if you were to watch a Moist Critical video on it, or a Pitch Meeting video on it. As I've gone on with my philosophy of making videos, is that I've been more poised to make the kinds of videos that I don't see others making, that I would like to see and watch for myself. I had a sneaking suspicion that no one would be willing, or able, to break down this movie in the artistic detail that I did, and what with my track record of covering the mainline games thus far, this was nothing more than another chapter in my covering of the respective IP. I also think it would be intellectually dishonest for me to suggest that the movie is bad based on the casting choice alone, as while being a peculiar choice, not to mention cynical with name recognition in mind, you can still make a sleeper hit even with that in mind. Conversely, I've seen a pattern of behavior and discussions about media where you can't write off a piece of media as bad unless you've watched it, yet simultaneously, if you had watched it all, that it can't be that bad as a result. I've watched this movie for what collectively feels like several times over, and I'll assure you, the process of that was not pleasant, nor did it make the movie better on rewatch. So, for the naysayers who likely will claim either argument, this video will put to rest any doubts. I'm sure you're also wondering if there was a theme I could discover from this movie, and would you be surprised that I couldn't find one? And unlike Has-Been, where its fingers were in too many pies to really cultivate a consistent theme, this movie didn't even try to commit to one. The only one that is vaguely trust is Tina's conceit of being special, but that's not really a theme more so than a character dynamic of hers, and that again comes at a cost of Tina being unusually selfish in a moment of gratitude for Lilith trying to save her. Speaking of, I do find it odd how much this movie tries to build a relationship between Tina and Lilith such that it is more well developed than Tina's with Roland's, despite the fact that Tina has known Roland much longer than Lilith and that Roland risked his own life out to save her, whereas Lilith was quite willing to throw Tina to the wolves for a paycheck up until she suddenly decided not to. Tina was calling Lilith a bitch, and Lilith was threatening Tina at gunpoint, and not 3 minutes later, Lilith puts herself in front of Tina to protect Knox twice, and Tina seems playful with the idea of Lilith having been hired by Atlas to collect her, and trying to vouch for her when Roland didn't trust her. In a much better movie or show, we'd be able to believe these two have gone through a lot to have an understanding of their respective plights, but again, this show does not care for such stupid things like character growth and relies again on the meta of these two, along with Krieg and Roland, being a vehicle for the quartet of Vault Hunters. The presence of any of these characters in the movie might as well be no different to someone bashing action figures together, as had any of them been swapped for any of the other Vault Hunters in the games would make no narrative difference to the movie as a whole, while having the same effect of getting someone to soy jack at the pretty colors and purposeful distractions. The only victory that comes from watching a direct of a movie like this is that, in all of its cynical attempts to cash a check on the back of an IP it clearly disgraces, it ultimately failed to even make back its money. A concept I'm sure future installments, like the Minecraft movie, already poising itself to be just as awful as the Borderlands movie, are sweating bullets over being a box office bomb, discouraging such vain attempts to rake in on video game franchises like this to continue. And that was that, folks. This took me roughly a few months to get out, and while it may seem like a swift process for you, I was hoping this would have taken much shorter given the respective amount of footage I had to go over. But alas, nothing is certain when it comes to analyses and breakdowns. Speaking of, given that I already mentioned the announcement of Borderlands 4 would put my attempt of making an analysis of Tales from the Borderlands further back on the bucket list. I will reassure you that me tackling Tales from the Borderlands is still on the table, as given the track record of the mainline releases of the Borderlands games, I'm expecting Borderlands 4 to be slated no sooner than September or October of 2025. That gives me about a good year to figure out and get to work on Tales while I also get my Odd Architecture miniseries back online, before I then turn my attention right onto Borderlands 4 itself, whether for good or ill. As per usual, all citations will be in the pinned comment of this video, and if you like this video or my other content that you feel so inclined to, I have a Patreon with a minimum and maximum donation of $5 that you could send my way, and to clarify, this Patreon does not paywall my exclusive content of mine, and it's just there as a way to show your gratitude. I hope this video and all others before it has entertained or enlightened you, and I hope to see you in any future videos I make.